Within Malcolm in the Middle, Francis is a character who is consistently one of the most chaotic, self-centered, and frankly, often stupid people on the show.
Just missed your third history deadline, Francis. I am not going to Spangler's summer school because my partner blew off his half of the project.
Didn't you get my half? I slipped it under your door.
This is your half? Yeah? This is my half!
Well, if I knew you were gonna go so overboard, I would have spent a little more time on my section.
Whether it be his harebrained scheme to run away from his school with a girl that really doesn't even want him and was giving hard signs of that in season 1.
Francis?
Oh, don't move. I want to remember this forever. Everything is okay now that we're together. I can't tell you how beautiful you look at this moment. You look like an angel or a perfect dawn or a galaxy of stars.
I don't think we should see each other anymore.
To the weird sexist arguments he starts with Piyama.
I mean, it was a stupid fight, I guess, but it was emblematic of everything that was bad with the relationship. I mean, there were principles.
Principles are important.
I know. I mean, so what if I'd had a couple beers? How's it look in front of the guys if the woman's driving?
One thing that's clear is the man is deeply flawed, but even considering his many flaws, he was also consistently one of the funniest and most interesting characters who helmed some of the best plots in the show. And by the end of season 5, I would say it really feels like Francis has also grown more than anybody, and really was becoming a man who learned how to take responsibility on and to live a decent life. And much of that growth seemed to be powered by the positive influence of his new, naive, but ever-forgiving boss, Otto, and his new position as a ranch hand for Otto. The ranch really was the first time we saw Francis be able to kind of get comfortable in his position, and for many, it seems that that version of Francis is their favorite. So that's why when season 6, episode 6, entitled How's Christmas Gift rolls around, and it's revealed offhandedly in just a couple sentences that he got fired from the ranch for putting money in the wrong ATM, it just seems so sudden and out of the blue and just wrong for the characters. I mean, as mentioned before, Otto was an exceedingly forgiving person. Francis made many mistakes, so to suddenly turn on him just feels wrong. And furthermore, the decision to cut the ranch storyline was never really discussed by anyone involved in the show in any interviews or anything like that, so we never got any idea as to why it was cut. But on top of this, the character of Francis goes from appearing in nearly every episode of the first 5 seasons to being in maybe about 25% of the final 2. So naturally, this spawned much curiosity and much discussion has popped up online as to why this storyline came to an end, as well as why it seems that Christopher Masterson just wasn't as involved in seasons 6 and 7. And so I wanted to talk about the 3 biggest theories as to why that happened. Now, if you haven't liked and subscribed yet, now would be a great time to do so, and also thank you for any members of our Patreon, free or paid. If you want to help support us make content, you can check out our Patreon where you can get extra content, as well as the weekly videos early and ad-free for as little as $2, and there's even a 7-day trial. I mean, you could just binge whatever content that I got on there, then cancel if you wanted. I mean, I can't stop you. That's patreon.com/smokinsessions. Now let's get back to it. So, why was such a big change that didn't really fit the characters made in the first place? Well, let's start with the most common theory that I've seen, and that's that Kenneth Mars, the actor of Otto, was sick due to coming down with cancer. This is by far the most commonly repeated lore, so much so that I've seemingly pissed off people by daring to suggest that this might not be the case. Now, why would I suggest that, you might ask? Well, thank you for asking instead of jumping straight to conclusions. How reasonable of you. But the reason I have some doubts about this narrative is because it doesn't quite match the public timeline we have, and there's no proof of this. It is purely just fan theory. Ultimately, the only public records we have shows that Kenneth Mars was diagnosed with cancer in 2006, and he didn't retire from acting entirely until 2008. The ranch storyline, however, mind you, was cut way back in 2004, 2 years prior to his diagnosis, and 4 years prior to when he officially retired. Now, you could say maybe he waited to officially retire and he just didn't appear in any projects at all in that time, and so therefore he was retired just unofficially. But he did appear in person in an episode of Hannah Montana and of a show called Oliver Bean in the years between 2004 and 2008, and he also did voices for The Land Before Time. And so considering he did make in-person appearances for other shows, it seems kind of strange that if they wanted to, he wouldn't come back for at least just one episode to kind of give Otto that goodbye. There's also a bunch of fan theories about some sort of scrapped episode where Otto was supposed to come back and get his send-off, but that never happened, and that episode was scrapped due to his illness. But again, there is no proof of this. Nobody has ever said this from behind the scenes, or none of his agents, none of the people that worked on Malcolm in the Middle. Again, it is purely fan conjecture. So is it possible that Mars was feeling sick for a couple years prior to his official diagnosis, leading to him maybe lessening his roles? Sure, that's definitely possible, and maybe he didn't find out the cancer till later, but was still sick. But again, considering he had those other guest spots, it just seems a little weird that he couldn't make it for one episode further of Malcolm in the Middle to give Otto that goodbye. And so again, I'm not saying that there couldn't be some truth to this, but people are way too tied to this comparatively to how much evidence there is. Of course, that leaves the question is, if Kenneth Mars being sick wasn't the problem, then what was? Well, this brings us to the second most prominent theory, and that's that Christopher Masterson wanted to work behind the camera more. And this is less theory and much more confirmed fact. While Christopher Masterson had a primary role throughout the first 5 seasons, later on in the show, he began to express a desire to do more work behind the camera, particularly to Bryan Cranston. And after speaking to Cranston about directing an episode, Cranston worked hard to get him that opportunity to do so. Initially, Masterson would shadow other directors of the show until he felt ready, and the moment would finally come for him to officially direct his first episode in season 7, episode 14, entitled Hal Grieves, which to his credit is a very solid episode. However, I do want to note that Masterson didn't get any writing or producer credits or anything else really. He is only said to have directed this episode. Of course, leading up to that though, he was shadowing people, and yeah, you don't get credit for that, sadly. But generally, you'd think if he were significantly more involved to the point where he literally couldn't be in the show much anymore, that he'd do more than maybe just one episode. Also, I've seen some people state that part of this theory is that Masterson just wanted to focus on other aspects of his career as a whole, but considering around the time period that he lessened his role in Malcolm in the Middle and shortly after Malcolm in the Middle, he really doesn't have any credits, whether it be in front of the camera or behind it. So while some of this is certainly at least a portion of the reason as to why Francis isn't in the show as much, I think there's one more piece to this puzzle, which finally brings us to the third and final theory. The ranch was cut and Francis was cut back due to, drumroll please, financial reasons. You know, one of the things that made Francis's plots feel so unique is due to the fact that they were usually completely separate from the primary story, giving those plots a kind of show within a show type feel. Of course, sometimes they'd mix and Francis would come home or something of the sorts, but mostly Francis was in a completely different location with a different group of people. But if we consider what that means for the business side of what I just described, really, you're just doubling the necessary budget. You have to pay for twice the locations, twice the actors, and twice the crew. Earlier on in the series, during the first few seasons, when the viewership was strong and the Emmys were rolling in, I'm sure they could justify whatever budget they really wanted. But once things started to slow down, it seems like tough decisions had to be made. Now, look, maybe it wasn't a financial choice at all, and maybe the drop in viewership starting halfway through season 4, lining up with The Ranch being dropped in season 5, is purely coincidence. But to me, it seems like a mixture of financial constraints and Christopher Masterson wanting to work behind the camera that led to the dropping of the Ranch storyline and the lessening of Francis's on-screen time overall in the last couple seasons. And if Kenneth Mars' health played into it at all, it was probably a much more minor factor. This is Future Rocky breaking in. So I got a cameo from Cadet Eric, and one of the things that he says I think kind of proves the point that I'm saying here, or at least it shows that there's a history of them cutting plots because of budgetary reasons. So here's Eric on one of the major reasons why the Alaska storyline was cut.
I was told why I was written out, which was very interesting and a nice insight into the way that television works. The Alaska storyline overall was very difficult to shoot, to record. They created a really, really funny scenario where it was always a torrential blizzard outside. And so every time a door would open, there would be massive wind and snow blowing in, and characters would walk in covered in snow, and then they would dust themselves off and start the scene. But when you have to begin the scene again, you have to clean up all the snow or put it back on the people, reset it, fire up the wind, which is just huge fans because we were shooting in Burbank, California. And that costs a lot of time to do it. It took a lot of time and energy to make the windows frosted, and the clothing and the set pieces and the jokes, which I think were worth it and were hilarious. But ultimately, they realized that it was not going to continue happening. They weren't going to finish in time. And in television, time is the most expensive thing. So really, really interesting little thing that had nothing to do with me or any of the characters that were part of the Alaska storyline. It was just too cumbersome to continue doing.
So there you go, but while this isn't related specifically to the ranch storyline, again, it does show that they have a history of this, so it makes it even more likely. But what do you think? Are you still sold on the idea that the ranch was cut purely due to Kenneth Mars being sick? If so, let me know in the comments. Overall, though, I do appreciate all of the support on these videos recently. Check out the Patreon if you do want to support us any further. My name has been Crazy Rocky, and this has been a Smokin' Session.